Good evening, newbies, and welcome to Nonprofits Empowering Worlds podcast. This is our 12th episode. Can you believe it? 12 episodes. I'm so proud of us. Today we are joined by Starnisha August Ali, also known as Sister Star. She is the founder of the Black Midwifery Collective. I am your host, Bridget Scarborough. I am a nonprofit strategist and also the founder of 501c3 My Org. This podcast is also part of a global network called the Female Solution Global Network. And without further ado, let's hear a warm welcome from the Female Solution.
Women have the power to transform this world. We can end crime and violence if we all agree to do one thing: share. Let's share our wisdom, share our time, share our talents, share our finances, but most of all, let's share our love. This is the Female Solution.
Leaders of Nonprofits Empowering Worlds. Let's go.
But the vision that God gave me, I felt that it was time for me to step out and work on the vision that God gave me.
We need look no further. We have a unique voice. We have a unique talent pool.
Hey, welcome, Star. How are you?
Greetings, Sister Bridget. I'm well. How are you?
I'm so honored that you can be here with us today. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here as well.
Yes. So the Black Midwifery Collective, you're the founder.
Yes.
It's a Chicago-based organization.
Yes.
But before we get into your title, can you tell us a little bit about yourself beyond the title? What life experiences have you had that kind of shaped who you are today, which is a midwife?
Yes. So, I mean, just to back it up, how I kind of almost got pulled into this work. I was a young mom at the age of 23. Did everything I could possibly do. I was an athlete, always extremely healthy. We were pregnant with our first child. We were planning on having a birth with a midwife at a hospital, but we were also having like all of our lab work being done at a hospital and then giving it to our midwife because we were going to give birth at a freestanding birth center outside of a hospital system. Went to one of my last routine visits, and this happened in California, to just get some lab work done. They actually said that my amniotic fluid was extremely low. Didn't reach out to my midwife. It essentially admitted me into the hospital, got me on IV, and then started the induction process, which included Pitocin, which is an artificial stimulant that essentially stimulates your uterus to go into labor contractions. It was extremely intense, a very long process, and something that really could have been avoided. I essentially could have been hydrated, long story short, I found out after I kind of reviewed everything. But essentially, I remember waking up at the age of 23, coming out of a coma, finding my son being resuscitated on a table next to me. I then blacked out. He was rushed to the NICU. I woke up hours later, very disoriented, not sure what happened. And at that point, thank God we were able to make it out of the hospital. And at that point, I also had a C-section. I remember them giving me the Pitocin to start my labor. It intensified. And then I think maybe less than 24 hours in, they called an emergency C-section because his heart rate had dipped. I remember being rushed into an emergency room, and they immediately started a quick countdown from 10 to 1. Before they can get to 5, I felt them starting to cut into my womb. I remember screaming out, "Stop, stop, stop, I can feel it." And then I blacked out. And that's when I woke up, like I said, very groggy, but seeing my son being resuscitated next to me. And that was a very traumatic experience. Like I said, later on, after I had a chance to really process what had just happened. And I'm thinking, how could this happen? I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm an athlete. We did everything we thought we were doing right. You know, my mother-in-law was a holistic practitioner, so eating extremely healthy, seeing a licensed midwife outside of a hospital because I wasn't high risk, but yet I somehow got caught up in this cascade of interventions that happens quite frequently, specifically for women of color. So when I left that experience, I started to delve into Black maternal health because I'm like, if this happened to me and I'm in extremely good health, this could happen to anybody. And then I knew that I wanted to be involved. I knew that I wanted to eventually become a midwife, but I know that I didn't have the capacity to be on call 24/7 as a midwife. Our schedules are extremely grueling. So I went on to be a doula, which pretty much is like almost like an assistant that could participate either in hospital or in a community-based setting. I was a midwife or a doula for over 15 years. Since that birth experience, I went on to have 3 other children. So I'm a mom of 4. My first baby, like I said, was born via C-section within a hospital, and the rest of my children were born in community-based settings. I left California, going to Chicago to train to become a midwife. When I got to Chicago, it was actually illegal to be able to practice as a certified professional midwife. Now, hence, I just left California, where certified professional midwives had been legal for quite some time. Home births were normal, they were legal, and so were births at a freestanding birth center. But in Illinois, because of the head of the medical board was there, and there was a big issue in regards to vicarious liability, we could not practice because the Midwives Practice Act bill had not passed yet. At that point, I was already enrolled in one out of, I think at that point, 9 accredited midwifery schools in the country. The other one that happened to be within a community college system, it happened to be in rural Wisconsin. So I was attending classes, doing my didactic work online, but also in regards to becoming a midwife, you also have to do clinical training with with an actual midwife, actually in the field, your clinical training. So I reached out to the president of the Certified Professional Midwife chapter for the state of Illinois. This was at this point an all-white organization that had been in existence for over 40 years. There were no midwives of color within the entire state. There was one other student midwife that I think was just coming into the organization at the same time. I reached out to this midwife via email and over phone, explaining that I was from California, that I was currently living in Illinois, enrolled in a midwifery school, and I needed to get a preceptor as soon as possible to start my clinical training. And I wanted to ask her if she would take me on as a student. She continually told me several times that she would take me on. She was finishing up with a student and she would bring me on. This went on for about a year. Several times we were supposed to meet and that never happened. So one day I got in my car. I decided to drive up to Wisconsin to the borderline, about a 2-hour drive, to just come into one of their meetings. So I got there, stormed into the meeting and introduced myself. I said, "My name is Star August Ali. I am the woman that has been emailing you several times about finding a preceptor, someone to take me so I can get my clinical training." She then quickly apologized. There was about 10 white midwives at that meeting. Quickly apologized, and then one of the younger white midwives who was serving a predominantly Black community in the Chicago area stood up and was like, "I'll take you as a student." So I left that meeting with the preceptor. I started training. I was working illegally underground with the fear of a felony for 3 years while attending classes online at night. Because of the requirements in terms of what's needed to have training, it's almost impossible to work a quote unquote typical 9-to-5 job. So I had to find a way to also support my children, but also complete the training. That was almost impossible because there is no federal funding allocated for this. My preceptor did not pay me, although some midwives throughout the US do pay some of their students because they understand that it costs to go to births. A lot of us are moms doing this for the first time. So childcare, gas, et cetera. To be able to attend births, you're spending at least $300 to $400 each birth you attend out of pocket. And this particular midwife did not provide a stipend or pay me, yet I was on call for 24 hours a day for a 3-year period straight with no breaks. So a way that a lot of student midwives are able to survive and get through it is we also do doula work at night. So that's, and also postpartum work. So that's working for a lot of white wealthy families in the evening, providing overnight care. Also attending births at a hospital as a doula when you're not on call for another birth. And so I did that for quite some time. And during this entire time, this organization was trying to pass and legalize the Midwifery Practice Act. And they had been trying for 40 years. I was getting a lot of personal calls to me from Black families, not only from the state of Illinois, but also from neighboring states, asking if I would attend their birth as a midwife, even though they knew that I was a student midwife and I was not licensed or yet credentialed at that time. They even said, we understand this. We'll hire the white midwife that you're training under, but we just really want you to be our primary midwife and to work with us. And so this went on for quite some time. And one of the issues that would come up a lot is I was noticing that as these families were calling in, the one thing they were always asking is, does she take Medicaid? Because I have Medicaid, I don't have money to pay for it. And I kept saying, no, there's no Medicaid right now. You'd have to pay out of pocket you'd have to pay her out of pocket. And yes, I would come. But you would have to pay her out of pocket. And so at this point, the Illinois Council of Certified Professional Midwives was pushing to pass the Midwifery Practice Act. I, at that point, had brought up to them like, hey, I know you guys are pushing the Midwifery Practice Act, but there's no type of language within this particular statute that also has Medicaid embedded within it so that, families could also access this life-saving care. And they responded back saying, well, let's just pass this bill first, and we'll come back and write another piece of legislation that would address the Medicaid issue. And for me, historically, in the US, it has taken almost 10 years to go back to rectify a bill to add in the Medicaid piece specifically for CPMs. And I was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. Essentially, you want to pass this bill and you want to push forward this quote unquote agenda that you're putting in these committees at the Senate and Senate hearings, saying that this is going to help the Black community that you're serving. But yet when it comes to you actually making sure that we have access to this life-giving care, you're willing to leave us behind and have us follow, 10 years later down the line. Now, mind you, this is a major problem because specifically in the state of Illinois, over 3 out of 4 births for Black women, our births are paid for by Medicaid. So it's an access issue for us. You know what I mean? Like, not even to mention the fact that over 92% of our births, our deaths within an institutionalized setting, a westernized medical, was deemed preventable according to the recent IDPH report, right? So what's happening is we're being funneled into a system, and because of obstetric racism, obstetric violence, right? Even though they're implementing these quote unquote biased trainings, they're not really having an impact. We're still dying at a 3 to 4 times rate that of white women. Yet when we want to find a provider outside of this hospital system within a community-based setting, and that would be either at a freestanding birth center or a home birth with both a midwife, we don't have access because we don't have the money to pay for it. So they got us coming both ways, and our hands have essentially been tied. So, sorry, I'm just on a very long tangent. So at that point, I saw that I was going to have to get involved in the legislative policy work as well. And I wasn't going to, let this all white organization kind of lead the front. So I founded my own organization, my first organization, Holistic Birth Collective, with that in mind, just to pass the Medicaid piece as well. I actually hired their lobbyists. My partner and I at that point had used our stimulus money as moms, used our stimulus money to hire their lobbyists to write this bill, to push this bill. We wrote it for her to essentially introduce it, find a legislator that would sponsor it, and then to be able to push it within the House and the Senate. Our bill did extremely well because our bill was able to show that it would be a cost savings of over $300,000 to the state of Illinois for every very low weight baby that was not admitted into the NICU. And we passed unanimously. But here's the thing. Our bill was not able to move forward because we had CPM language embedded within the piece of legislation. So the Medicaid piece passed, but it couldn't be written into law because we had the CPM language, and the Midwives Practice Act at that point hadn't passed. So I then immediately knew that I had to rise through the organization, this all-white organization that had been in existence for 40 years, which I did. became their first president of color, and within 6 months of my presidency led us to victory, passing the Midwifery Practice Act. At that point, I was then able to go back to implement the Medicaid piece. I then went on at that point, because I saw there were other issues that we needed to address. So within the span of that year, I went on to write 2 other pieces of legislation passing it. One of them allowing CPMs to be able to primary within a freestanding birth center, and the other bill that said, regardless of whether your MCO was in network or not, the hospital had to take you if you had Medicaid at any hospital, and they couldn't turn you away. And the reason why that had to take place, because there's an abundance of obstetric deserts all throughout the state of Illinois, specifically on the south side of Chicago, essentially. So if your MCO provider was not in network, for instance, at the University of Chicago, which is a monopoly, then you would have to get on public transportation if you didn't have transportation to go up north to another hospital just to be able to get basic prenatal care. And I was like, this is ridiculous. A lot of people have multiple children. A lot of people may not have transportation. We have real winters in this city. And because of an MCO not being in network or not, and on top of the fact that we're in obstetric desert, so there isn't any other options, we were being sparsed across the state and throughout the city. And so I removed the MCO network restrictions so that no matter what, if your MCO is in network or not, right now you can go to any hospital in this state and they have to take you. That was another part of access, right? Because when there is a lack of access, that's also another form of oppression as well. So we wanted to remove that as well. So then I went on.
Let me ask you,
yes.
I'm sorry, real quick. The council that you stated you were the first Black president of the council. What is the name of that council again? Can you say it?
Sure. It's the Illinois Council of Certified Professional Midwives. And shortly after I passed the Midwifery Practice Act, I actually resigned very publicly in the press, in the Chicago Tribune, because they were using, the Black maternal health movement as quote unquote political capital to advance their movement, but yet they weren't actually trying to do anything for our community. And I was just sick of it. So I resigned from the organization, continued on with my own work through my nonprofit organization. And I went on to, I knew that there were, I needed to take this movement further because, and at this point I had passed the NARM exam and became the first one in the state of Illinois eligible for licensure as a CPM in the state, the first person of color. Then I went on to get licensed
now at some point there wasn't, and correct me if I'm wrong, was there not a licensed certified professional midwife at one point? That this license is fairly new in Illinois, am I correct?
Yes and no. At one point, CPMs were legally able to practice and attend home births about, I think it was in the early 60s, the early 70s. But one of the hospitals, I'm not sure if it was UIC or University of Chicago, had like a whole campaign and essentially like destroyed the program because there were a lot of midwives here, not any midwives of color. They were that were attending, and some physicians as well, that were attending home births. I think it was through Olivio. I think it's through a program called Olivio. They were attending home births, but like I said, there was a whole campaign that went out from these hospitals because, mind you, they see us as competition, right? Like our focus is low risk physiologic birth. And it makes sense, right? Because if only 8 to 10% of the births in the United States right now, women are deemed high risk, yet 90% of us are being funneled into a hospital when the majority of us can simply be receiving care from a midwife within our community. But people don't understand that this is all about money, about control over our womb, about, reducing the population. There's just so many reasons why we're seeing what we're seeing. But initially, before there was hospitals, there were midwives. A lot of us, our grandmothers and great-grandmothers, were delivered by the hands of midwives because at one point we weren't even allowed into hospitals in the early 19th century. It was a white woman's privilege. They wanted to have access to a drug by the name of Twilight, which essentially was a narcotic that knocked them out. They were able to give birth without remembering anything. But if you didn't have money and you weren't of influence or had a position, you were not allowed to give birth in a hospital. And once they recognized that there was a lot of money involved in midwifery, there were a lot of white doctors that were graduating from these medical schools that really wanted to profit off of birth. So they essentially started a blackball campaign. They passed bills like the Towner-Shepard Act that actually put in so many different regulations in regards to midwives, Black midwives, traditional midwives that were at this point up to time were serving our community. The majority of the South at one point, I think it was up to 90% of the South was being served by midwives of color were delivering babies around the 30s and 40s. And once they had this campaign to blackball all of the traditional and Black and Indigenous midwives, they kind of took over, and then birth was mainstreamed into hospital systems, and that's where we've been the entire time. But since then, our disparities have increased. Our access to community-based providers has decreased, and any midwives of color was almost eradicated. As of now, there's maybe 2 of us that are certified professional midwives in every state across the U.S. There is less than 100 of us right now that are currently licensed to practice in the United States.
We have a comment from Naima.
Greetings, Naima.
If a woman is pregnant, does she have the legal right to choose to deliver by midwife at home rather than in a hospital? Are there insurance issues?
Okay, so
I think you answered a little bit of that, but maybe if she wasn't on.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so before the Midwives Practice Act passed, before I passed that bill in 2021, no, you could not you could not have your baby at home with a midwife. We would run the risk of being taken to jail for a felony for practicing quote unquote medicine illegally. Even if that was your choice, we couldn't serve you in that way. So what happened was a lot of us, had experienced the medical system with our first babies and had been traumatized and did not want to go there. A lot of us were deciding to have what we like to call free births or unassisted births at home without a midwife present. It's very common, actually, even though the data isn't recorded in terms of vitals and statistics, the number in regards to women of color giving birth unassisted at home is very high because we are very conscious of the stats walking into a hospital system. So a lot of us are willing to just give birth at home without an attendant. I can bear witness to that. My third child, I had an unassisted home birth as well. I was unwilling to walk into a hospital system to experience what I did with my first child. I was not at that point living in Michigan, and I could not find a midwife of color. So I decided to do it on my own. As of right now, you can, in the state of Illinois, you can have your baby at home. The Midwife Practice Act did pass. I'm currently the board chair for the State Midwifery Board for the state of Illinois. They started issuing out our license as of January 2025. So it's been a little over a year since we've been able to legally deliver babies within a home-based setting in the state. But before then, one of the ways that we were able to kind of hide ourselves. Well, first off, our clients knew that they could not, if we at any point had to transfer, they could not disclose that we were their midwife or they would take us in. If we had to call 911 because of any type of a medical emergency during or after the birth, they had to tell them that we were their doula or a friend. Because once again, it couldn't be on the record. And if we had to have a client that transferred in, we could not go in as their midwife. We had to go in as their doula or as a family member so that it was not documented online. So what happened was a lot of these births were registered as unassisted, meaning the baby just came, but we weren't able to sign the birth certificate or to really acknowledge that we were the provider for these families during this time because of our own legal risk and what we, stood to lose as a community of midwives.
Okay, I'm going to stop here and take a brief commercial break. But when we get back, I would like to get more into, you are the descendant of a grand midwife, right?
Yes,
so I want to talk a little bit about that. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you've developed your nonprofit around this issue. So
Great.
Let's take a quick commercial break and we will be right back, newbies.
Everything we're made of contains light. From the sun that feeds our world to the energy that flows within us. Everything we're made of contains light. From the sun that feeds our world to the energy that flows within us. With LifeWave X39, we've found a way to put that light to work. With X39, we achieved something remarkable in the field of wellness and science that others could not. By utilizing LifeWave's unique patented technology, X39 uses light to elevate GHK-Cu, a copper peptide known to support overall health and wellness. Unlike traditional light therapy, X39 uses the body's own infrared light to naturally increase vitality. By gently stimulating the skin with light, our non-invasive, non-transdermal X39 patches help you conquer your active lifestyle and pave a new way to vibrant health.
Hey family, this is Charles Humphrey of MCH Publishing, and I'm here with Ashada, and we at the Soulful Chicago Book what?
This is the Soulful Chicago Black History Book Fair, slamming.
We getting down in Hyde Park. Just run it down, my sister. Just tell us, for the people, a little bit about what we're doing here today and why.
You know, this is the Soulful Chicago Black History Book Fair, and this month is very important. I feel like we don't give it the type of recognition that it needs. But beyond that, I do all things literary, and we have so many ancestors that have taken a tradition of writing and done great things. Well, we have those of us that are carrying on that tradition, and nobody knows about them until now. So the Soulful Chicago Black History Book Fair is allowing us to tell our stories according to ourselves for our own benefit, and it's just beautiful. I mean, you could have been here today if you wasn't here, but if you were, it's been amazing. People came in consistently, children, and we have children's authors, we have nonfiction authors, we have fiction authors. This is really good, and it's about taking our own power in our own hands and doing what we do on the literary tip, though.
Right.
I gotta work, but I can't help it. Everything going too smooth. Not just about bringing my African shit like this. Bringing the African shit.
Peace, everybody. My name is Star August Ali, also known as Sister Star. I am a midwife, a mama of four, and also a descendant of a grand midwife who served her community in the 1940s. I became a midwife because Black families deserve care that sees us, that honors us, and keeps us safe. I have risked my freedom working illegally underground. I have been challenging broken systems. I have also helped to change laws so that our community can return birth back to a sacred place. That's why I formed the Black Midwifery Collective, so that we can grow and diversify the midwifery workforce to get as many midwives on the ground as quickly as possible, and also to transform systems that have been failing us for such a long time. This work is about love, about legacy, and also about survival. So follow along with us. Go on our website at blackmidwiferycollective.org, sign up for our newsletter, donate, and continue to follow along as we continue to make history and transform these systems that have been harming us for quite some time. Peace, everybody. My name is
Let me get you back in your rightful place. There we go. So tell us a little bit more about your ancestor who was a grand midwife. What is a grand midwife, first of all? And who was this woman in your lineage that gave you this DNA?
Sure. Okay, so a grand midwife is it refers to we can either say grand or granny midwife. It refers to a Black midwife who served her community primarily in the rural South. predating birth really being inside of a hospital system. So this was in the South. This a particular a grand or a granny midwife typically would have been like an elder in our community that was very knowledgeable about herbs and just about birth overall. She would serve several counties, and my great great grandmother, who was a grand midwife, her name was Georgia Madison. She served the Bastrop, Texas area in the 1930s, 1940s. She would go from town to town, serving women in terms of births, also having, like I said, having a very extensive knowledge on herbs, on food, and really, as Black midwives, we were known to keep the family intact, right? So making sure that as this baby was coming, we would go there, we would make sure the house was clean, make sure there was food that was cooked, make sure there was clean laundry. Everything was settled before the baby came, just to make sure that it was a very peaceful and beautiful experience overall for the families. But yeah, the Black midwife was a huge pillar to our communities, because not only were we delivering babies, we were also very knowledgeable in herbs and in medicine, natural medicine as well.
So the person in your lineage was your great grandmother, you said?
My great grandmother, yes.
Great grandmother. And so even though you were already aware that your great grandmother was a grand midwife.
No.
Oh, you were not? Okay.
No,
that's what I was gonna ask. Like,
yeah.
Because the story that you told earlier was that your motivation was your own experience.
Yeah.
Is what kind of catapulted you into midwifery. But are you telling me that later you found out about your
I did.
ancestor?
And we say Allah is indeed the best of planners. Yes, ma'am. So as I was finishing up my clinical training and just in my clinical training, and things were getting very, very difficult, right? Because I was having to provide for my children by also being on call, like experiencing this racism, while also fighting on our behalf as the Black community. I was just like, oh my God, this is almost impossible. This is why there's none of us. This is really hard. And then I remember having a very, very long conversation with my grandmother, and I think she just assumed that I knew, but I didn't know. And she was, just reminding me like, hey, your great grandmother, was a midwife and blah, blah, just telling me the story. And I did not know at all. I didn't know. And it was perfect because that was exactly what I needed at that moment in time to keep moving. I was like, look at this. This is Allah showing me that this is my path. This is my divine assignment, and it's in my blood. So I learned that, and I've always like held that very close to my chest, because Allah knew exactly what I needed at that moment, to keep going.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
So tell me a little bit more about the Black Midwifery Collective, the organization.
Sure.
How do you go about? One thing I know about you is that you're very good at establishing partnerships and advocating for yourself, as you demonstrated earlier with your story when you said you walked into the council and said, look, I've been trying to get connected with you and you're ignoring me and I need some action right now. So
yes,
I know that this is part of your personality. And that I do think that it's a superpower of yours that you're able to actually go out and talk to people and build relationships, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So there, one of the things that, and I've always told you this, even when we worked together in the past, I said, I want you to come in and do, like, I know you remember me telling you this, that I want you to come in and do a workshop to my other clients.
Yes.
And about building relationships, because one of the mistakes that some people make when they start nonprofits is that they rely solely on grants and just thinking that a good proposal in writing is going to get them funding.
No.
And it doesn't usually work that way. And actually, in what I know about you, your experience has actually been probably the opposite. You go out, you talk to people, you build those relationships, and then people say, want to fund you. And then they tell you, oh, we want to give you this money, but you just have to fill out the paperwork now.
Yes, yeah.
It's almost the other way around. And that's really how things happen. So I always said that that's like a superpower of yours. And you actually have you've built a strong relationship with someone just recently. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so let me back it up a little bit. So my organization focuses specifically on the growth and diversification of the midwifery workforce. Specifically, all the work that I do is systems change. So whether that is as our historic project, and I don't mind talking about this later on the call, we're currently installing what'll be the first direct entry midwifery program in the state of Illinois. It'll be the 12th or 13th accredited midwifery school in the United States, the first one ever placed within a predominantly Black community, and the only one ever designed to be within an urban community in the United States. In addition to the several pieces of legislation that I talked about that we authored and passed as well. And so, yes, it's definitely about relationship building. Before I ever started to get funding, I was doing the work irregardless. I wasn't necessarily going into this to have funding to do it. I just knew that it needed to be done as quickly as possible. And so I built a lot of relationships with people around me that were also in this space. And in doing the work, I was approached by several funders that saw that we were making a huge impact on a systems change level. And I always tell people that are just now starting a nonprofit or have been in this space, and maybe not are seeing as much success that they would want to see in terms of receiving grants, is that a lot of people right now are not really wanting to fund topical work, right? So that's like direct services. People are wanting to fund things that are going to have a huge impact even outside of our lifetime. So if you're trying to solve a problem, as most of us are through nonprofits, if you can look at a permanent or long-term sustainable solution that people would want to get behind to support to make a huge impact, that's what you may need to focus on. And yes, it takes a very long amount of time. Just for the project that I just mentioned with our collaboration with the City College of Chicago, that was a 5-year project that I worked on. I first had to pass legislation, right? Rising through the ranks of the all-white organization, becoming a president, legalizing the bill, then being able to go and start conversations with the City College of Chicago, dealing with educational redlining within the city colleges, but still being very adamant about making sure that it was in the community that needed the most. And then once I had that relationship built, I garnered a lot of support on a national level because this project is a blueprint for the rest of the country. And my relationships continue to build because once again, it's systems change. And I would, like I said, continue to encourage anybody, no matter what space you're in, and, trying to solve problems, is try to think of it on a much bigger level of something that's going to outlive you and not necessarily something that's topical for the moment right now, because funding is very tight. Right now, obviously, with what's going on politically, and a lot of funders are really focused on long-term sustainable systems change and not necessarily topical solutions. So yes, partnerships are really important. As I began to garner a lot of momentum, had a lot of visibility both in the press, also a documentary I was featured in that won a Gerson Award both in the United States and abroad. Made several covers, including Crane Chicago Business as well, several magazine and newspaper articles as well. And really people recognizing that what I was constructing and building was going to have such an impact, not only in the state of Illinois, but on a national level. And it was a blueprint that could be replicated across the US. I had a lot of celebrities that were, already involved within the Black maternal health space that wanted to get involved and to support. One of those people happened to be Tatiana Ali. I met her at the Black Maternal Health Caucus, I think 2, maybe 3 years ago, in Joliet, California. At that meeting, I was able to talk to several legislators talking about the project that I had going on. We connected after and had like a very brief conversation, and I told her about our historic project with the City College of Chicago, and she immediately got it. She knew that this was something that was not only historical, but really was a real solution that needed to be amplified throughout our community. So we had several conversations. She agreed to come into Chicago to do any type of programming that I wanted to put on to be able to uplift this project. And we did. We had a fireside chat in Hyde Park
in Hyde Park, Chicago, for about it was about a 2-hour, 3-hour session. We had a lot of people come out from the reproductive justice community, the Hyde Park South Side community. A lot of us overall came out, had a very thorough, in-depth conversation about our historic project with the City Colleges of Chicago in terms of trying to get as many midwives on the ground as quickly as possible. We've stayed in contact. She is a very big supporter of our work. She's constantly amplifying our work. If you go on her webpage, right on her Instagram platform right now, you can see her uplifting a lot of the work that we've already done. And I have a meeting coming up with a very well-known or a new philanthropic organization by the name of Birth Fund as well. Elaine Weltworth, who was the editor-in-chief of Teen Vogue magazine. That meeting is coming up very soon as well. I've also had a chance to, and when we're talking about collaboration, right? This is also me collaborating with legislators. So Representative Mary Flowers, as some of you guys may know, is the longest standing Black representative in the history within the state of Illinois. She was the main chief follower of all of our pieces of legislation and was the first one to make the introduction between us and Kennedy King College. I've also held very close relationships with I've also had conversations and connected with Governor Pritzker. I've also talked to his wife. I've also talked to several other legislators as well. And just, maintaining these relationships, including the current mayor of Chicago, his wife as well, who also was a birth worker. So just maintaining these relationships, constantly keeping in contact and letting them know what's going on, asking him, specifics on how they can help to support the movement in terms of leveraging their platform and their connections as well, is one way that I keep momentum in the movement.
Thanks for sharing that. I think a lot of our listeners that are thinking about starting a nonprofit need to hear that, because guys, Star is somebody that's going to pick up the phone and call whoever. She's going to show up at whoever's doorstep, and you do have to put that time in. I think that it has been what has made you be able to accomplish the things that you have accomplished in such a short period of time.
Definitely.
It's on pen and paper.
Yeah, no, you have to have a presence within the community.
What is one?
Yeah, having a presence in the community.
No, go ahead. I think we have a little bit of a delay here. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, whatever niche you're in, whatever sector you're in, you should be attending community-based events with other people that are also in that space and building collaborative relationships in terms of you guys being able to work together. And anytime you are offered an opportunity to address your community, right, via panels, via coming out to community-based events, anything, you need to take advantage of that, because that's one opportunity that you can uplift or bring visibility to the work that you have going on. And Chicago is very small. I know it's large in a sense, but it's also very small. And so once you're involved within a particular sector, there's also people in that particular sector that are also involved, and you guys can get a chance to know each other. And when it comes to funding, specifically within the nonprofit space, there's already a selected amount of funders that fund that particular arm of whatever movement you're in, and they all know each other. So once you get one, they all kind of fall in. So when I first started, I think our first grant technically was $5,000, and then the second grant we got was $50,000. And since then, they've just come in. A lot of it hasn't been, like, I'll even use today, for example. I had a meeting with a funder that did a project-specific funding for a project I had last year. The project we just completed the project. We met again this morning to talk about, moving work forward. I wasn't even going to ask them for funding because we're really focused. I wasn't asking for funding because I thought they would only want to do project specific funding for a project that I already had worked on. But my aim right now is really to launch our first cohort with the City College of Chicago this August of 2026. But when I hopped on the call, they were just pretty much like, we want to support this project. This is our goal. This is what we're aiming to do. How much do you need? What do you need for funding? It's a matter of people coming to me because they know that we're doing the work, we're making the impact, and our work speaks for itself.
Now, you talked about
Uh-oh, I can't.
you
I
talked
lost audio. I
earlier
can't hear
about
you.
having a long-term plan. Can you hear me?
No, can't hear you. Let me try.
Let's give it a moment.
I can't hear you now. Let me try to disconnect my. Come back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I cannot hear you.
Are you
That
able
is
to hear
so
me?
odd. Oh no. Should I potentially leave and come back on?
Yeah, let's try you leaving and coming back on. If not, I can leave and come back on as well. Go ahead.
You want me to leave out? Or do you want to go to commercial and then I can try to?
Yes.
Oh no. Okay, let me try to log out.
Yeah, I'm going to take a commercial break and then we will try to figure out what is going on. We'll take a quick commercial break.
I heard the commercial. Can you hear me?
Okay, can you hear me
Yes,
now?
I can hear you now.
Yes.
Perfect.
Let me put you back in your rightful spot here.
Okay.
Okay, there you go.
Perfect.
Okay, so you talked a little bit earlier about having a long-term plan.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to go back around to that because you just recently had a summit where
Yes.
you rolled out a strategic plan, correct? Do you want to talk a little bit
Yes.
about that?
Yes. So my organization was approached by two separate funders, pretty much to create and to convene and pull together anybody working within a community-based setting to come up with a state strategic plan to address all of our needs as community-based workers in the state of Illinois. As you know, there are several different plans or reports that have come out to be able to try to address our disparities within the Black community from the state side, but nothing has ever come out ever from the community. So we pulled together over 40 plus different community-based workers organizations throughout the state, specifically people that are serving families within a community-based setting to come together to talk about not only what we needed financially from a programming standpoint and also from a legislative standpoint to move all of our agendas forward to be able to serve our families that we wanted to serve in a much better light. And so we were very successful in doing that. We are currently at the tail end of writing up our state strategic plan, where we've identified several different factors that we need to be able to address collectively. We are tomorrow launching the website that has some of these findings on it. And we're also getting ready to launch a webinar series with a lot of the data that we've collected as well. From different researchers that participated within this study. We are planning on potentially doing another summit in spring of 27. We've been working very closely with an organization by the name of Health and Medicine Policy Research Group, which at this point now will be kind of taking a lead, as we will be really having our focus as an organization focused on the launch of our first historic cohort at Kennedy King College. And yeah, it was a very successful event. It was the first time that we were all collectively able to sit down at a table to talk about what we needed individually to move things forward in our own individual sectors. So that included community-based midwives, that included doulas, that included lactation consultants, mental health workers, substance use disorders workers as well. Anybody that was serving families outside of this hospital system, we all came together to, to reduce the siloing and to really identify where we could collaborate, what we collectively needed, and to come up with an action plan to be able to address the state together to amplify our needs.
And you have something coming up starting tomorrow, correct? The webinar series?
Correct. Yes. The webinar series, we're going to be doing every Friday in the month of February, starting tomorrow. We'll have people that will be talking about the workforce shortage, about racism within healthcare. And then we'll also be discussing our own, because our organization actually conducted our own community birth survey where we collected data from our community that really amplified and reiterated what we were already hearing from our community in terms of our desires and wants to have options outside of a hospital system. And then some of our lived experience in terms of our narratives of what we've experienced within the hospital system as well. And that'll also be integrated into this webinar series.
Okay, I was trying to bring up the actual flyer. Let me try to do that again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there we go.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
How can people register for this?
If you go on if you go on our website and on our Instagram page for blackmidwiferycollective.org, there should be a registration link both on the website and also within the bio of on our Instagram page as well.
Okay. So you hear that, guys, blackmidwiferycollective.org. And also on your website, there is a lot of good information. So people should really visit that website. There's a lot of statistics that you should be aware of, a lot of reports. One of the things that I learned when I was visiting today is that about 7% of all contemporary midwives in the United States are Black.
Yes.
And then you have which is, I should have phrased that, only 7%, right?
Yeah, only 7%, correct.
And there is a really good video about the history of midwives, Black midwives, on the website as well. So I definitely encourage anybody to, check that out. There's a lot of good information. The video was, I would have liked to have shown that video, but it's a little bit too long for this podcast. So I would, again, go to the website, because if this is an issue that you have not been exposed to, the Black Midwifery Collective website is a good place to start. Educate yourself, for sure. We're almost coming to a close, but I would like to know, Star, what is one lesson that you've learned since you have founded this nonprofit that you wish you would have known before you started the journey? What was a hard?
Not everybody is going to stay with you along the journey. So when I first founded my first organization, Holistic Birth Collective, I had a partner at that point, and we actually had to part ways. It was really hard, but I had, I'm obviously a woman of faith, and I'm also a woman of discernment. And so I just had to really understand that, people are going to go with you for part of the journey. But if you know that it's your assignment and this is what you were called to do, you have to keep moving irregardless through it, and know that, everything that you need to complete that assignment and that mission will come to you. You just have to stay steadfast. And yeah, when it comes to nonprofits, it can be very difficult, especially in the beginning. A lot of us start off with no funding, right? So you're doing this because it's the right thing to do and it needs to get done, irregardless of if you have the funding or not. And, also being in this space, we can go through some times where there isn't any funding. I've gotten to the point, before where there wasn't any funding and we ran out, but I still continued to do the work and eventually it came back. So just knowing that the mission should always be at the forefront of your mind, It should be the reason why you're involved in this work. And just know that, if you're doing the work, your community will support you, and that the impact that you're making should be the fuel to keep you going, knowing that you're actually making a difference outside of these really, really big, NGOs that are essentially using us as political capital to advance their mission, which a lot of times is tied to funding, but don't necessarily have the community's heart, the community at heart. It really is those who are actually on the forefront doing the work without these big budgets that are making the huge impact that needs to happen. And that's because we're directly tied to the work. And, when this is something that is impacting you, that we already know the solution's in the room. It's just a matter of us getting the funding and the resources to be able to move all of our missions forward. So yeah, so just staying steadfast.
Well, Star, I definitely appreciate you sharing your time, sharing your wisdom with us today. And are there any other closing thoughts that you would like to share?
I would say, yeah, I think, if you're involved within a nonprofit space, I think I mentioned this earlier, it's really, really important to make sure that your work, that you are devoting a lot of your life and your time. And I know a lot of us as executive directors and founders are sacrificing our family to move a lot of our movements forward. So you want to make sure that you are setting up something that's going to outlive you so that people can also pick up where you left off and keep moving forward. So systems change, right, through legislative advocacy work. It's the easiest way to beat them is to beat them at their own game. Once you have a law up, we all have to abide by that law. So right now is a really good time to really lean into legislative policy work, regardless of what space that you're in. And like I said, always approaching it from a systems change lens is really going to be able to bring you in front of an audience of people that have influence from a social standpoint, but also funders that may be able to fund your movement in your particular space that you're trying to make the most impact at. And like I said, also finding ways that you can also collaborate with other people that are in that particular niche or area that you're working in is also important, because as a Black female executive director, there have been times where I've had to call other Black executive directors to get advice, inspiration from, as we move through this movement, and it can be very taxing on our mental health overall, and it can be very draining, and you just feel weary sometimes. So having other sisters that I can call and be like, hey, I'm experiencing this, because we come up against racism and very hard systems a lot. But being able to know that you're not in this movement alone, and you have your sister that can also, encourage you to keep going and drop some words of wisdom to refill your cup to keep going is also helpful. So I am very close to other EDs in the city of Chicago and even nationwide that I reach out to whenever I feel like I just need some advice or some inspiration.
Well, thank you for sharing your time, sharing your wisdom. I'm going to take you off the stage, but I don't want you to go anywhere, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Sister Star.
Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you for joining us.
Bridget.
It has been a pleasure. All right, newbies, I hope you enjoyed Sister Star. Just so you know, the Female Solution Network has programming every day, Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. I'm sorry, not from 7 a.m., at 7 a.m. and at 7 p.m. So I would like to just show a brief commercial for the show that's happening at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning on the Female Solution YouTube channel, as well as you can find her on the Female Solution Facebook page. So this is Coffee Break, and with Cinnabella, who is also known as the Bronzeville Diva here in Chicago. So let me just share with you her information before we have our closing remarks from the Female Solution. So just stay tuned a few more minutes, guys. You can catch Cinnabella tomorrow at 7 a.m. on the Female Solution YouTube channel, as well as her Facebook, as well as the Female Solution Facebook page. And she interviews artists who are making an impact in this world. Thank you for joining us this evening. And let's hear word, the Female Solution.
Women have the power to transform this world. We can end crime and violence if we all agree to do one thing: share. Let's share our wisdom, share our time, share our talents, share our finances, but most of all, let's share our love. This is the Female Solution.